You know, in the AI article that I was just talking about a couple of minutes ago, I mentioned that for artificial intelligence to work, it needs a lot of data. That is true also to a certain extent of quality management systems as well. And in order to, let's say, understand a process, whether that's a machine process or a human process or a chemical process, whatever, you need to collect data, you need to look at that data, and you need to make decisions about that process, again, whether it's a human process or you know, some sort of a mechanical process, based on that data. But there's a couple of issues. One, how do you collect that data in a way that is accessible so that it can be looked at and processed? I mean, do you use do you use pencil and paper? Do you use email? Do you use a smartphone app? Do you just yell across the cubicle? Do you stand around the do you stand around the water cooler? How do you collect this information? And then also, what data do you need to collect? And that's the big thing. Okay, well, fortunately, I don't have to answer those questions. That's why we have smart people come on the show. And here to talk a little bit about how to collect data and what data to collect is Sameer Kadam, Senior Solutions Consultant for Sparta Systems and co-author of the article, Still Struggling with Quality Metrics. Hi, Sameer. Thanks for joining us.
Hello. Thank you, Dirk.
Hey, so
to you guys today virtually.
There we go. Hey, in your experience, what are the biggest hurdles to companies to collecting data in a way that's useful?
Well, I'd say historically, you implemented a new system to collect data for operational and compliance purposes only. You basically built a system based on known desired output. So for example, for serious events, you just determine what are the regulatory reporting requirements, what is the FDA requiring me to report on, and then you made sure you had a database with the fields that captured these elements. Now, when users wanted to use those same data that was captured for reporting to try to do trending and metrics, it didn't work. They were disappointed. They couldn't get matching results. And I think that's some of the challenges. The system wasn't designed to produce that kind of data. So basically what I mean by that is the data fields may have been lookup fields, free-form text fields, and attachments. And what you need is lookups and selection drop-downs that you can run all your metrics off of. For non-serious events, the main goal was always to fix the issue quickly and efficiently. The goal was never to influence the product or design or process innovation. And now we look at a much more longer-term approach to that data. Companies have started seeing this challenge and are now designing systems with analytics in mind up front. And that, to me, is such a key component of a good implementation. You got to design the system up front with the desired metrics and process improvements up front in the design process.
So Sameer, walk us through this a little bit. How much of this is technical and how much of it is I guess what you could call cultural, like we've always just written it on a clipboard, or we have a meeting once a week and we talk about it. You know, how much of that is cultural issues and how much of it is technical?
Yeah, the technology has always been there. So I'd say it's definitely more of a cultural shift. In the past, it was a cultural shift to even. I remember working with auditors about 10 years ago that would never give up their paper notebooks. But today, almost everyone we deal with is somewhat familiar with computers. As you know, everyone's using some kind of smart device or smartphone. And I think now more of a modern day cultural shift is about how and why we capture the reporting data. So at first, companies put in quality systems because they were required to do so by the regulatory authorities. Then we saw more of a shift of implementing quality systems as a market differentiator that shows that you're focused on quality. My company has quality as a #1 perspective. Now we're seeing another shift where companies are using metrics and trending to see how they can be more efficient in their business operations. You also want to make sure you identify your major issues before they become costly. And you want to gain the insight and stop the issues from actually making it to the production line. You want to make sure you track these issues much earlier in the process, through the development process, than after a product actually goes into production. So this is definitely a cultural shift.
And before we get into the type of metrics that you might want to collect, let's stay on the data collection here just for a little bit. So I think I heard you say that okay, so maybe people have moved to electronic. Maybe not as many people writing stuff on clipboards and that sort of stuff, or just sending emails. But even all the disparate types of electronic data collection that we're using and data collection, and way of sharing data, there's all these different kind of data silos. I mean, how are those being brought together so that all this electronic data that's out there is easily accessible in one place?
Yep, that's a good question. You need to start with the output that you want to trend on. You always ask yourself, what questions I'd like to get answered first, that I can't do today, and what would have the biggest impact on my business? And then you track that back to the detailed data points. As you mentioned, multiple sources of where that data is. So you got to make sure you identify those sources and any of the gaps. Part of it is then linking that data and linking those different sources and being able to pull from the same location. So this is the start of your data collection definition. Unfortunately, all data points are rarely in the same system, and you really have to define the process of implementing a traditional system, but keeping analytics in mind as you're designing that. And also keep in mind, you probably won't get it right at the first time. This is an evolving process. You want your system and your data collection process to be flexible and grow with you as you learn more. You want to keep revisiting it every couple of years, because you're going to notice that certain metrics that you're capturing are now out of date, and certain trends you're following are no longer, as relevant.
Okay, so let's get to the metrics part of it. So let's say you've got the data collection part down, and the data is all being collected, it's easily accessible. So with all this data collection so easy, let's say at that point, isn't it possible people will just collect anything and everything and just vacuum up everything around them, and you get tons of data? How do you decide which data to collect so you aren't just inundated with maybe data that just isn't even necessary?
Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what our webinar is going to cover. We want to make sure we cover some of the key performance indicators. What is it that you want to get, and what is it you want to target? So I'm going to go into some of the global metrics versus some of the site-specific metrics, and then how your company may be doing against other companies in your industry. So we want to show you some of the best practices on producing some of these KPIs.
Okay. So as Sameer said there, we are going to have a webinar on this very topic that's going to be key performance indicators and data collection and so forth. It is called the 7 KPIs, Key Performance Indicators, that your QMS should provide. This is a webinar next Tuesday, May 16th at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. Sameer will be one of the presenters. And Sameer, there's another presenter that will be with us as well. Is that right?
That is correct. Mickey Shah, he is the managing director at Process Stream. I've worked with him for many years. We've actually implemented many systems together. He works with us. He's a partner of ours that's done pretty well with implementing systems just like ours.
Okay, perfect. So it'll be Sameer and Mickey will be the smart people on the show, and I'll be your host. So if you want to read a little bit more about this and also see a link out to the webinar, just check out the article from Sameer and Mickey below the player page there for a registration link, or keep an eye on your email inbox for details on that as well. So Sameer, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, guys.
All right, and we'll see you next week
on Tuesday.